Hi, and welcome to VIBEZ Daily. This is a daily devotional curated by VIBEZ Church to help you practice the way of Jesus and be all that God has called you to be. You have joined us for our year-long series titled Devoted. Acts 2:42 tells us that the followers of Jesus were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking of bread, and to prayer. This podcast was created to provide context and commentary for what you read each day. Just before our friends begin discussing today's reading, we want to invite you not only for fellowship, but for prayer as well. We have created the VIBE Daily Chat Group to offer you fellowship and a community where you can state your observations, ask questions about the reading or the podcast. You can join us by downloading the VIBEZ Church app in your favorite app store. Click Join the Conversation and join us today. And finally, we hope that you can join us for prayer. Prayer happens Monday through Friday, and more information on that can be found on the VIBEZ Church app under prayer. Now, let's begin our conversation on today's reading.
Hello and welcome back to our VIBEZ Daily podcast titled Devoted. We are in day 128. Woo! I am back with my friend Meya. And we are just here cutting up a little bit and discussing Second Chronicles. So
All right.
this today we're going to be going through chapters 6, 7, and 8. No, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Yep.
Thank you. And so we were talking about how elaborate and lush the temple was that Solomon was making yesterday. We discussed that, and so now we're just going into like the completion of that, and now the ark being brought to the temple and all of that. So chapter 5, what we got? Any thoughts?
Well, I underline this because you are so knowledgeable, so I want to see if I can just tap into your knowledge for a minute.
Lord.
So in 5 it says, I'm going to skip the first sentence, but then he brought all the gifts his father David had dedicated, the silver, the gold, and the various articles, and he stored them in the treasury of the temple of God. So I might have like read over something. So I know that David had worked on, getting things together and all of that.
Yeah.
But he stored up things.
Yeah.
And he he willed them, for lack of a better term, to his son.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. So there was a part, I'm glad you asked something that I could actually answer because I was getting nervous.
Give yourself more
Oh, I'd
credit.
be
You're
nervous.
good.
I was like, where is she going with it? Okay, so there was a part though that David actually said like all of my treasures like that belonged to like actually him personally. He was like, I'm giving this to the Lord in the temple.
Oh.
Yeah, and then he was just like, okay, so who's going to do the same? Like he kind of like charged Israel to be like, so, and who else is going to come and bring their riches and stuff to dedicate to the Lord too? So like some of his like leading commanders, like even like Joab, came and showed up with like stuff too.
Okay.
So that was, oh Lord, I think this was in First Chronicles.
First
I
Chronicles?
want to say it was in First Chronicles that we got those details. I don't think those details were in the Kings.
Okay.
So, oh Lord.
All right. Well, thank
You
you.
stretching me.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm just playing. I'm just
But
playing
I
with
was
you.
like, so he's had like a little safe
Yes.
full of stuff, like, and that just I think yesterday we were talking about the forethought with this, like that just shows that he was dedicated. It's like, okay, go open the safe, we got some stuff from Dad, let's just go ahead and integrate that into the wow.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And so like even like as parents, right, like we just even thinking like, what are we like leaving for our kids to do, like for the Lord, or like how are we equipping them? Like I think that's one thing that I had written down as a note when I was reading in my phone, like, wow, like he really did try to equip his son like to do the work in the will of the Lord. And I'm just like, that's rich.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It really is, because I think that David, and we know that, he was human. He was a king, but he was human. And he was on the run for a long time. So he, like, I don't think I've thought about him in that way, like putting something to the side and charging his friends to do these kinds of things. So this is a really beautiful, like, just layer to him. You know, he wasn't always fighting and running. Like, he took the time to do this. So, yeah.
And so he really did have a soft heart for the Lord, which we see. It's so cute. Cute, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, it's endearing.
It's endearing, yes. That's the word, because I'm like, he can't be... Yeah.
No, he did that dance. He might have been. I don't know.
But yeah, so that's amazing. He said like, they had all this stuff, all these preparations, and now this ark, which represents the Lord's presence, has been for them, is being brought here, and from the city, it was in the city of David, where David had brought in, like you said, I think we just talked on the side about like him dance like David, right? And getting his little dance on. And so here it's in the city of David, and so he's bringing it now here to the tent. Any thoughts on this part?
I just think that it's so like everything is coming full circle, you know, like it's just a beautiful, like, just to like, we have the we were able to step back and like look at the whole thing. So can you imagine like what they were feeling in the moment?
Yeah, I was wondering that.
Yeah, but we have this full view of everything, and it's awe-inspiring, you know. So it's just so rich that all this is coming together.
I thought about the same thing. I was like, what would it have been like to like have been there, like for all of Israel to come out and to see the ark being brought, and like they talk about like the poles, that like the poles were so long, and the Levites brought them. I think they learned their lesson about not having the Levites carrying this ark. Okay, too many people done died already.
Yeah, it's like,
let's get the right people.
What's your lineage?
Right.
Okay.
Let's get the right people. So yeah, they didn't learn their lessons, but yeah, that these poles were so long you could see from the outside of the inner room, and then all of these. I love it when they keep mentioning like the Levitical singers, Asaph and
Heman.
Yeah, Heman and them. Like some of those names that I think I mentioned before, and another podcast is like that show up in the Psalms. Like these Psalms.
I was gonna ask you about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where they're from.
Okay. These are like the Levites who have created songs and hymns for the Lord, just like David did. And so some of David's are in here. There's a couple Psalms from like Moses in here, some unknown authors, but then they'll often say like the Levitical, sons of Asaph, or whoever. And so it's like it's literally seeing these same people here, which is so amazing.
It is. And you know what I like is they said they were dressed in fine linen robes. They came in there like, we're here.
I love it.
I love that.
I underline that. We're clothes people, so yeah.
Of course, yeah. But they came dressed, and not just dressed to impress, like they weren't just popping their collars. But this is a holy, not burden, but this is a holy thing that they have. You know, they have to do this, and they have to represent. So it wasn't so much that they were showing off, but this is what the Lord deserves. Yeah. So I'm gonna be in my best. I'm gonna, do all that I can to worship.
And I just even thought about like how even just all of Solomon's ruling, when eventually we'll get to it again, how it retells the story of this Queen of Sheba who comes and she's like looking at how the servants are dressed. And I'm just even thinking like Solomon made sure his folk was dressed, and that everybody was fine and fine linen. So I do love to even see here, because I never saw that before, just to see like the Levitical singers themselves were also dressed to a T. Yeah. And these fine linens. And so.
And they came there. They knew they had a job and they were doing that job.
Exactly.
Like, they came dressed. They had 120 priests playing trumpets, they had their band, and they were like, okay,
we're doing it.
This is our big moment.
I love it. And then I love in verse 13 and 14, where it's like the house of the Lord was filled with a cloud, so that the priest could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house. I was like,
can you imagine that? No. Can you imagine that? In the fact that these people, these worshipers of the Lord, they were like, I mean, they did have to run out, so it wasn't like they were like, oh, that's great, but it's just like, can you imagine being there in the presence where like you could see it? It's not just a feeling in your heart, but it's just like all of your senses are being just stimulated at that point. So
I mean, like, think about it. Like, it's a clear day outside. Mm-hmm. There could be no clouds in the sky, but yet right here in this temple is a huge cloud that we can't even see through. We can't even be in the midst of.
That I would have freaked.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd be outside too.
Please let that be you.
I'd be outside the temple too, because I'd be like, ooh, hold up.
Right before we get to 14, I believe this might be right, but when they say, they raise their voices and they praise the Lord with these words, He is good, His faithful love endures forever. It's not in Psalm. One of the Psalms? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and David repeats it over and over and over too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I know that's somewhere. I don't know exactly where, but I know. And then it's also in one of my favorite Fred Hammond songs. And so I'm like, that's Psalm. It's one of the Psalms. I know that for sure. So
yes. I love to see how they just link together.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I love about this project, so to speak, that we're doing. It's like you get to like see how everything crisscrosses and weaves together, and it's just like it starts to come alive for me, because I'm like I can see the words in my head and I'm like, wait a minute, I've seen that before, kind of thing. So,
exactly and it makes sense, right? Like it makes sense that like David created songs and was teaching them to the Levites and how to praise and worship. So now they're singing songs and it sounds very similar to David's words, and like you said, now they're being compiled into this book of Psalms, and we see the same words there. So like this, the linkage of it all.
Repetition is good for me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, give it to me 1,700 more times.
Exactly.
Because I need that.
Exactly. I love it. Yeah. So here we are in chapter 6. Now, when Solomon has this long blessing of the people and prayer of dedication of this temple. Now, there's a lot in here. We don't have to go through it all.
Yeah.
But just anything that jumped out to you about what he was praying about, or blessing the people with, or charging the people with.
I think what I have underlined is a little bit off center of what you just asked.
Okay.
But so when he's having this, conversation, I'm on chapter 6, verse 7. It says, then Solomon said, my father David wanted to build this temple to honor the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. But the Lord told him, you wanted to build the temple to honor my name. Your intention is good, but you are not the one to do it. Like how... First of all, I know David he understood, but I'm sure he was like crestfallen. Yeah. But can you imagine having to like recant that as the child? Yeah. Like, I'm sure his heart grieved a little bit for his dad. Yeah. Because as we mentioned before, his dad put aside stuff, made all these preparations and plans, but for the Lord to tell you, you're not going to be able to see this to fruition. Yeah. It made me a little bit sad. Yeah. It grieved me a little bit. So. Yeah.
And even to the point that like, he didn't even just not be able to be the one to build it. Like, he died before even like the project even began, right? Yeah. I agree for David too. Like this was the desire of his heart. This is what he wanted. But the Lord was like, listen, you got too much blood in your hands, boo.
You did a lot.
You've done a lot.
I haven't killed you, so be grateful for that.
Yeah, but you're a man of war, and you can't do this. And so I do love though that even when the Lord told David no, that David wasn't like, forget you then.
You got in my head, because I was like, you just like, well, I'm not gonna do anything. I'm not gonna do anything. I'm just gonna.
But he still, like, after the fact, still made so many preparations for this temple. Yeah. And just to make sure that it still got done. Like, okay, I can't do it, but I'm still gonna make sure that, like, I do what I can do.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was big of him.
Yeah.
And also what I like about David is like he did the things.
He did his
but
things.
He was always like, he would do the stuff, but then he'd be like, oh Lord, please forgive me. I'm sorry. I'm gonna write this whole poem and psalm and everything to you. Like, so he knew. So he probably was like, I might deserve this a little bit. I mean, of course, I don't know what he was thinking, but he was just very humble with it. Because he's like, well, I know what I did. So
yeah. He definitely was humble when he got told about himself.
Can you imagine that though? Like, okay, Dad, I get it. I still got this gold put to the side though.
Yeah, exactly. You take my allowance though. I'll give you my allowance.
10% at least.
Yes, I love it though. I love his heart. Yeah. I love it. I love that they keep on like recanting this. So like you said, that it is part of their tradition to like continue to like tell the story. Like, and that it even starts before Solomon, because Solomon could have gotten up and started with himself. Yeah. But like he recapped the story of like, this is my dad wanted to do, he couldn't. This is what we're doing now, and the Lord has like approved. And so he says his prayer like, Lord, please accept this structure.
Were you reading?
Oh, sorry, I'm just like paraphrasing.
Oh, okay. I was like, let me follow along.
That's the Victoria version. But yeah, like, just please accept it, and then like, please, like, if somebody sins and comes to this house and asks for forgiveness, is like verse 22, then like, you know, hear us, right? In verse like 18, like, you know, if you hear, oh God, like if you hear, oh, this is 19, I'm sorry. Okay, if you hear like, you know, our prayers and you hear our plea, like, please listen to our cry in the prayer that we are offering up to you in this place, you know. And you know, if we're defeated by an enemy because we've sinned, right? Like, because we've sinned and turned against you. This is verse 24. And if we acknowledge your name again and come back to you, like, please, Lord, remember us, you know, and bring us back to this land. So I feel like he's like naming all these situations where it's like, if we do this, we come back to you, please accept us back.
Because he knows his people. He knows,
right,
we're forgetful and we do stuff that we ought not do. So I think I want to go back just a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
To 16. We're still in 6, but 16. I feel like this is a little bit foreboding. Like, I'm going to skip a couple sentences, but it says, for you said to him, if your descendants guard their behavior and faithfully follow my law, as you've done, one of them will always sit on the throne of Israel. I feel like it's like, okay, this is what you have to do. Are you going to do that? Because I'm telling you what's going to happen if you don't do it. And I feel like sometimes we miss those, you know how you miss your exit? Now, you've seen the sign. Yeah. But you just keep on driving by and like, oh, shoot. I feel like we do that, and the Israelites did that a lot. So that I just underline that, because I'm like, are you listening to that, guys? Because it might be important later.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is what the Lord said to us. Like, he said, I will do all these things for you as long as you keep my word, you stay faithful to me, and I'll keep my end of the bargain if y'all keep y'all's. And so I do love that he's repeating this.
Yeah, it's like
he's repeating this, like he repeats like God's part and their part.
Yeah.
And that's what I do love. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I love that part.
Sorry, I took us back a little
bit. I'm always doubling back because I'm always skipping something. But yeah, this is a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think what I see throughout, and we've touched upon this before, is the fact that I don't think that there's a single chapter or verse almost that David is not mentioned.
Right.
And I think what we will see later on in 2 Chronicles is that people sometimes forget what their dad did before. So they had maybe a good example, but they don't remember that because they want to be the big guy in charge now. So I really like that about Solomon. He was constantly saying, okay, this is what my dad did, good or bad or whatever. He remembered that, because, you know, if we forget our history, we're bound to repeat it, kind of thing. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. No, I love that David is even just like used as a standard in terms of his love and dedication to the Lord. Mm-hmm. That, like you say, he just continues to show up like over and over. It's so good. Mm-hmm. It's so good. Yeah, I love that Solomon is continuing to even like pray for not just the Israelites. And I think I've mentioned this before, like one of the Kings or something where this came up. But how he even in verse 32 not only prays for like the people of Israel, but the foreigner.
Yeah.
And he's like, and when the foreigner who's not of your people comes from afar, because they have heard of your great name, like listen to them too, please. You know, and here, and I love that, because that's what the New Testament Pharisees and Sadducees really struggled with and missed. Like, the Lord was never just about the Jews only and for all time only, right? Like, even here, and even in the like some of the laws that he created, there was always some little room for a foreigner to come in and to like pray to God, worship God, and for God to hear them too. Yeah. And so like it was always for Jews and Gentiles, but the Jews were the ones to like spread the name of the Lord. And for those who accepted him, the Lord would hear from them too. Yeah. But for those who chose not to, and you know, camp out with Baal, well,
the stronghold of Baal.
Well, you got demolished. But you know,
and rightly so. But and I really like the fact that you brought that up, because I think that is even applicable to now. Like sometimes I feel like we could be a little bit more inclusive of, even as Christians, as non-believers, like just welcome everyone. It's not our job to, you know, exclude people based on, because how are you going to win people over? How are you going to build the kingdom or, you know, add to the believers if you don't do that? So I like that you know, mentioned that.
For sure. He wants everyone. So here he is, and he prays and he continues to pray. And then chapter 7, we come, and let me just start off. I love this first verse.
Okay.
Like, as soon as Solomon finished his prayer, fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices.
But then what they say is the people fell face down on the ground and worshipped and praised the Lord by saying, "He is good. His faithful love endures forever." That was the right thing to say. Yeah. Because I think I probably would have
passed out.
Yes.
Yeah. And I love that it says this in 2 Chronicles, because I feel like when I was reading, I remembered like that this happened, but it wasn't in the Kings.
Okay.
They did not say this part. Okay. They said that like the glory of the Lord filled it, but the whole fire from heaven, I was like, I feel like it came from heaven again, kind of like it did with Elijah. But here we see the layer here. Yeah. Of this extra detail here, and I love it, and like you said, I love the people's response.
Like, oh, okay, well,
let me just go and bow down
on down to the floor. But I like that. Like, wow. Again, it's just like the story is so rich and textured. It's like I can literally imagine myself there. Yeah. And just like, imagine that. Like, you put the offerings there, but the Lord's like, oh, I'll burn them.
I'll burn them.
You don't need no match. Yeah. No wood sticks, nothing. I got flint. That.
No. None of it.
Not any of it. I got that.
Yeah, and I love it. And like you said, first of all, you mentioned these sacrifices and how much stuff that they had. I'm looking here. I'm like, okay, 22,000 oxen, 120,000 sheep. This is in verse 5. And like all these things that they sacrificed, I'm just like, now I can't imagine seeing 120,000 sheep. That's a lot. Like, how big is this herd of sheep?
It's big.
Who's doing that? Like the priests.
Who's hurting it?
Who's hurting? And then these priests are chopping them. Because I'm thinking back to like, even some of the laws where it's kind of like, can take the fat off the kidneys and put that there.
It wasn't just a quick, no, you got to do things precise. Or if you don't, then it's not worthy of a sacrifice.
Yeah.
So
I was like, they were busy.
They had probably an assembly line going on.
Yeah. No, for real. Because I was like, I'd be tired after like sheep number 12.
Yes.
I'd be like, all right, y'all.
Yeah.
Who's tapping in? But yeah.
I got to tap out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so. Yeah, and there it is, the fat of the peace offering. So yeah, I underlined that because you just said you got to cut the fat off certain parts. Because I was like, wait a minute, the fat of the peace offering, but now that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it was still very detailed.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love that the people in like verse 8, they feasted. It seemed like they had this big party for 7 days.
Yeah. Well, it was the Feast of Shelters?
Yeah.
Is that what that was?
And they did. Is that what yours says? Because in this version
in
it doesn't.
8.
Okay.
7, chapter 7, verse 8.
Oh, I'm glad your version says that.
Yeah, it says, for the next 7 days, Solomon and all the Israel celebrated the Feast of Shelters. I'll have to look into what that entails later, but yeah.
Yeah. I love it. And I think that was one of the 3 feasts that they were supposed to observe. So it's lovely to see that they're, like you said, still staying true to their history and like doing the things that Moses and them commanded them to do back then. And so I don't know, I want to party for 7 days.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That sounds fun.
That's a really good vacation.
No work.
Just
partying for the Lord.
Of Shelters.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And yeah, so I love, now this one's very like somewhat popular verse here in the 2 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 14. This whole like if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray, right? That one.
Yeah.
And then the Lord would like hear from heaven, forgive their sins and heal their land. But I don't think I ever really sat and like looked at what was happening before this. Like I didn't even realize that this was the Lord's response to Solomon, his prayer of all the things he just asked for, right? In this previous chapter 6, that like in this dedication of the temple, I remember growing up and memorizing the scripture, especially in Sunday school.
Yeah.
But to me, contextually, I didn't even know what was happening around it.
Yeah.
And so I love to see it here because for context, of that, like, okay, so he had just spent decades creating this temple, wondering if the Lord would accept it to sacrifice all these animals. Fire just came from heaven. He just said this long-winded prayer, right? All these things are happening.
Yeah.
And then this is what the Lord speaks and says. And it is. He's like, I have heard your prayer. I love starting in verse 12 though. Like, I have heard your prayer and I've chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice. And so I love that he just out the gate acknowledges like I've heard you and I accept it. And I just feel like it's just a weight off like all this work.
Yeah.
I'm like, whew, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's beautiful too, because sometimes we pray and either we don't hear and we're impatient or we're not sure if that was the Lord. He made it plain. I have heard you.
I heard you.
So there shouldn't be any doubt in your mind or anything like that. So that's beautiful. I would love to hear.
Come on.
Yeah, I have heard you.
Talk to me, Lord. Talk to me. Make it plain.
Please.
Make it clear.
Please.
Yes. So I love that he says, I heard you. And then he's just like, when I love it. He's like, not if I, or if this ever happens. Like, no, when I do shut up the heaven so there's no rain or command the locusts to devour or send pestilence among the people. Like, if you guys who are called by my name, if you humble yourself, and I love it. That's the first thing he says. If you humble yourselves, because that was the thing that we've been seeing.
Yeah.
The people who have humbled themselves before the Lord, even Ahab's old wicked self, back at the Kings, like if you humbled yourself, then he would hear.
Yeah.
And he would listen.
Yeah.
And he would restore something to you. He would forgive your sins. Like, he'd be attentive to you.
Yeah.
And he does it over and over again. Regardless of like how bad everyone's been acting.
People wild out.
Wilding.
But this also goes back to what we were discussing in chapter 6. Like, if you're...
Yeah.
Like, you can't just act crazy and expect things to go your way.
Right.
I'm giving you a guideline, which is really a generous guideline.
It's really generous.
So if you do this, if not, get prepared for the ramifications of your actions.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I think that's what he says in verse 19. You just summed it up, Meya version, for sure. But yeah, he said, if you turn aside and forsake my statutes, I'm sorry, this is ESV, so it's real, it's real.
It's real? It's really
it's just really real. Anyways. And so if you forsake my statutes and my commandments that I've set before you and go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will pluck you up from my land that I have given you. And this house that I have consecrated for my name, I will cast out of my sight. I will make it a proverb and a byword among all the people. And people are gonna walk by and say, hey, like, what happened to this house? And they will say, because they abandoned. Because they was wilding. Because they was wilding with these other gods.
Right, and you wild out and see what happens to you as well. So let this be.
Okay, they let him know it's not gonna be because of me. It's gonna be because of y'all.
Yeah.
So I do love that that he makes it plain.
He makes it plain. So you can't say, well, I didn't know, Lord. I just thought I could wild on Wednesdays. Wild on Wednesdays. I can't? Oh, okay, my bad. No, I've told you already.
I already let you know. But even like, because we've been through, Samuel and the kings and stuff already, and we've seen some of these kings acting up a lot. Years. I'm just even thinking how long it even took for the Lord to even come through on this promise of his. Because he had a lot of patience.
A lot of patience. More patience than I would have.
Because I've been like, listen, at Jeroboam, Rehoboam, we out.
You getting smited. It's smiting for all.
Plucking you out the land.
The pluck part. So my version says uproot. But plucking is very...
I'm thinking chin hairs.
Girl. Lord.
Oh, well, we getting rid of this. This is for good.
It's electrolysis. It's from the root.
It's from the root.
Uproot from the root. Yeah.
Well, there we go. Yeah, no, seriously.
Yeah, that's real.
It's
like
real.
the ESV version because, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. Plucked.
Out.
But so if we could skip over to verse 8, I have something that I want to run by you.
Okay.
So it's chapter 8, verse 11. So Solomon is talking about, moving his wife, who is the daughter of Pharaoh, and they put that in there purposely.
Yeah.
So he says, my wife must not live in King David's palace, for the ark of the Lord has been there, and it is holy. It is holy ground. So what are your thoughts on that? Why do they specifically say this and say it about her?
Yeah. I mean, I have my thoughts. We can go to Bible Project.
Yeah. Bible Hub.
Or Bible Hub to see what they have to say too.
But I would love to know what your thoughts are.
Okay. My thoughts is because I think that Solomon was well aware that Pharaoh's daughter were, in their terms, pagan, right? That like they were not Israelites, and they also probably did not worship God, Yahweh.
Okay. Yeah.
And they had their own gods, and she probably brought her own gods, because even just knowing how Solomon's his journey ends up is that his heart gets taken from God because of his wives and all of the gods that his wives bring with them and influence him to serve and bow down to. And so he starts to serve other gods because of his wives. And so I think he even just knew enough at that point to be like, okay, She ain't the one to bring in the presence of the Lord. You know it's that one you don't bring home to the parents, right? Like, can't bring you
Maybe
home.
If she was a Levite or something.
You know, so I think he just knew he couldn't bring her home to dad.
Yeah, okay, that's good. That's good.
But for whatever reasons, which probably was, like you said, for, rubbing elbows or,
political alliances.
Exactly.
Like that. Yeah.
That he probably did marry her and...
Strategically, that would, for Pharaoh, that's smart because you don't want, they've already had too much drama. Like, let me just,
Yeah.
So I get where
Egypt was still a powerhouse. Yeah,
definitely. So I get that. But, the fact that he had the wherewithal, though, to recognize that, still things ended up how they were, but at least he was like, I'm not going to defile, if you will, this holy ground because I already know she's not living right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, ultimately, I really do hope that probably should have just been like, it ain't worth it. You know, like, at the end of the day, you probably should be like, it ain't.
Let me give you some gold and send you back to dad.
It's kind, Pharaoh, but I'm going to have to pass and get me a girl from the tribe of Dan.
Unless you want to convert, for real.
Yeah.
I don't know what more to do.
Yeah, exactly. So that was good. I'm glad that you pointed that out because that stuck out for the first time to me too in reading this.
Oh, looks like we have another festival. So we talked about Festival of the Shelters, and now there's Festival of the Harvest. So making note of all these festivals.
Yeah, and so for my version says, so if anybody has other versions, that these are the things that Moses had commanded them to always keep, was of course the Sabbaths, the new moons, with the 3 annual festivals. For me, they're titled as the Festival of Unleavened Bread, the Festival of Weeks, and the Festival of Booths.
Okay, so that makes sense because mine is the Passover celebration,
the Festival
of the Harvest, which is
weeks,
and what is it?
Weeks. Yeah, which is your harvest one.
Okay,
yep,
okay.
It's the same.
And Festival of the Shelters
and booths.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, so the booths and shelters, those the ones where they were supposed to, like, everyone's going to live in tents or shelters, pretty much, to remind themselves of what their ancestors did when they came out of Egypt.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right, that makes sense.
Which I want to do one day. I just feel like I want to pitch a tent in the backyard.
Victoria. Really?
Yes, I was on the
You don't want to just
barbecue
go to the Bible Project and watch the. You really
I know. We're resort people. What am I thinking?
That's why I was like, it's good in theory.
I was the heart. It was the heart.
And your heart posture, and you know what? God sees that.
He's gonna
now. He might be like, okay, I see the heart.
Because of one mosquito and I'm out.
You're out. One little creepity crawly.
No, I'm out. I'm out.
See,
I'm already out.
But the heart is.
But the heart.
It was willing.
It was willing.
Yeah,
it was.
The flesh is weak.
All the way weak. Weaker than weak when it comes to bugs. But yeah.
Yeah, but the harvest one, I can get behind that. And we've already done Passover.
Come on.
So we just
we're
almost there.
We're almost there.
We're working towards it,
Yeah. Because my ancestors were Gentiles, so they wasn't even in the tents.
Yeah, we had houses, right? It was a resort of some sort.
I think it was a resort.
Wasn't it all inclusive?
It was like all inclusive. Yeah.
Well, we're working on it.
Caicos, yeah.
We're working on that.
Okay, well.
This was rich. This is a great conversation, Victoria. I really appreciate, just going over this with you because your thoughts are different from my thoughts.
Yeah,
and then we can interweave that together. So I really appreciate that.
Well, yeah. And I feel like we've come to the end.
We have come to the end.
I feel we've come to the end, and this has been good.
It has been.
We'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for the VIBEZ Daily Podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or download our favorite, the VIBEZ Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey